بنك التنمية الإفريقي يحضر لانتخاب رئيسه القادم الذي سيخلف النيجيري أكينومي أديسينا. من بين المرشحين الأوفر حظاً في هذا السباق يوجد الزامبي سامويل مونزيلي ميمبو. هذا الأخير يتمتع بخبرة تقارب 30 عاماً في مجال التنمية والأسواق المالية والتخطيط الاستراتيجي. قبل انضمامه إلى البنك الدولي كان ميمبو مفتشاً مصرفياً لدى بنك زامبيا ومدققاً للحسابات لدى شركة برايس ووترهاوس كوبرز، وهو حاصل على درجة الدكتوراه في الإدارة العامة من جامعة مانشستر وماجستير في إدارة الأعمال في الشؤون المالية من جامعة نوتنغهام. في إطار حملته الانتخابية زار ميمبو المغرب وكان لقناة إعلام تيفي معه هذا اللقاء. أهلا وسهلا بك سيد سامويل ميمبو.
أهلا، شكرا.
بداية يمكننا أن نتحدث عن المؤهلات التي تجعل منكم مرشحا جيدا لقيادة البنك الأفريقي للتنمية.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure to speak with you. I think the most important qualification is my love and my concern for the African continent. My love because I am convinced that this is Africa's time. We have everything that we need in Africa to make sure that the next decade is Africa's time. My concern arises out of 30 years of working in development, 30 years of trying to make finance work for Africa, and realizing that at this particular time, the geopolitics in the world has changed. The environment has changed. The climate is different. And the pressure on all of us to make sure that we are developing as quickly as possible is definitely here. What I want to do is to make sure that the experience I've gained working in development at the most senior levels, I can bring home to Africa and devote 100% of my financial skills, my management skills, my people skills in making sure we're making Africa a better place for all of us.
ما هو البرنامج الذي تعتمدون على تنفيذه إذا تم انتخابكم؟
If I am elected president of the African Development Bank, I want to do what I have seen right here in Morocco, where you take a vision, you have the patience to execute it well, you have the discipline to focus on implementation and results, and you have the flexibility to adapt and improve your strategy over time. My vision for the African Development Bank will focus on three things. The first thing that we must do is make sure that the African Development Bank is a world-class, top-tier institution that is efficient, effective, that builds partnerships, because this is not a job for one man or one institution, and also invests in its staff to make sure that we have a team that wakes up every morning devoted to making Africa better. The second focus is to make sure that we are supporting governments who know what needs to be done. They don't need any more lectures. They need support in order to finance the development for their people that they aspire to. And then thirdly, we must make sure that Africa is growing at a pace that is much faster than we currently have. If the continent is not growing, then we are not creating enough jobs for our young people who are coming out of schools. And that must mean pursuing a development path similar to what you see here in Morocco, where you invest in your traditional sectors, but you also invest in new sectors, doing so that in a way that builds your domestic market with an eye on your neighbors, that you're trading with one another. That's my vision for the African Development Bank, an institution that is the first point of call for governments who want to make a difference, an institution that is very clear-eyed that our responsibility for this generation is making sure that we stop the cycle of aid and debt and we move to a more sustainable cycle of growth and prosperity.
كيف ستتعاملون مع التحولات الحالية الجيوسياسية والماكرو-اقتصادية؟
So it is true that the global politics have changed significantly, but this is not the first time it has happened. It has happened before. And we must do what our predecessors did, which is focus on the resources that we have. Make sure that we diversify the sources of financing so that when decisions, as has been made recently, are made, we are prepared. Look, the American government has been a strong supporter of development on the continent. I come from Zambia that went through a devastating period of HIV and AIDS. The American programs for PEPFAR were instrumental in stopping it in its tracks. So their contribution is absolutely important. But as I remind all of us, it's a wake-up call that we must do things differently. So the sad truth is, this decision is not new, and it will happen again in other development partners, which is why I have been pleased to see that as I have gone around the continent campaigning for this presidency, the politicians and the governments that I meet want to do things differently. Business as usual on an aid-dependent development path is not sustainable. What they're looking for and what I'm keen to do is to make sure that they're attracting private sector investment, because that is the only sure way of making sure that in future, when decisions of this kind are made, we are resilient, we are sustainable, and we can make sure that we are charting our own path. And frankly, this is what I expect that the American government is looking for as well. They want a partnership. And I have worked at the World Bank with different presidents, different administrations. I have never failed to find common ground of mutual interests that serve the people that we are working for. That's what I will do at the African Development.
نعرف أن الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية غيرت حاليا برئاسة ترامب غيرت استراتيجيتها حيال الدول. ما هي نتائج ذلك على أفريقيا؟
What President Trump has done is to make the conversation around development much more transparent so that we all know what he's thinking, what the American government is thinking. It's on us to do the same. We need to have honest conversations with ourselves about what we want for Africa. Let me give you a few examples. We have just signed we have all agreed to the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. It's the largest trading bloc in the world. The opportunities are immense. It's time for us to have an honest conversation about the tariffs and the schedule we've put ourselves on. We don't have 10 years to implement the Africa Free Trade Agreement. We must do it immediately. We must trade with each other. The second thing we need to have an honest conversation about is how we feed ourselves. We put 60% of the world's arable land, yet we are only producing 15% of what we consume. Every year, we take $50 billion from this continent and we export that capital somewhere else. We need to have an honest conversation about how we make sure that we're buying products from Morocco, that Morocco is buying products from Zambia. And that way, we are investing in each other's economy. We are growing at a pace and scale that makes a difference. That's what the new administration has done. That's how we must respond and make sure that as we sustain our partnerships, because we must sustain, all of the continents must sustain working relationships. This is what I did when I was running IDA, when I was fundraising $93 billion in the midst of COVID, as governments were losing the lives of their own citizens. When you are in that scenario, you focus on what you want to achieve, you focus on results, you assure people you're going to be accountable for the results that you're going to show. And as long as these conversations are from a point of clear-eyed self-interest that is honest, that is accountable, that is focused on the common good, we will get results.
في حوار أجريتموه مع جون أفريك تحدثتم باستمرار عن الاستثمار أو الاستثمار من أجل السلام. كيف ذلك؟
One of the things that we must deal with on our continent is we must never leave countries behind. We must never leave a segment of our population behind, whether it is women, whether it is young people, whether it is graduates coming out looking for jobs. If you don't take care of these groups, it's inevitable that conflict will arise. It's either social tension within a country and sadly, in some cases, even conflict between countries. And therefore, a development institution like the African Development Bank must work very closely with the African Union, investing in those segments that give people hope, that make sure that people have a sense of what their future holds. And the good thing in Africa is that we've got a wide range of opportunities to do so, whether it is in fisheries, whether it is in trade, in services, whether it's in construction. When people see you investing in infrastructure for the long term, you minimize the risk and threat of peace.
كيف يمكن للبنك التنمية الأفريقي أن يجعل من المشاريع التي سينفذها مريحة أو مربحة؟
When it comes to development, my experience has taught me that you should make sure you have a comprehensive program that deals with development at every single level. The one thing that the African Development Bank will gain under my leadership is that we will take a comprehensive approach to development. Sometimes we like to think we can go to the gym and just train one leg or one arm. It doesn't work like that. You have to focus on your diet, your exercise, your well-being. That's how development works. And we've got many good examples right here in Morocco. When I think about infrastructure, for example, we've got the World Bank coming up. Not the World Cup in 2030. We've got the Africa Cup coming. Yeah. All of these investments that are being made are going to have a lasting difference. And what I really enjoy seeing is that these are stadiums and facilities that are not being built outside the city. They're being built within the city in partnership with the private sector to make sure that after the event, these are facilities that will continue to be used. So when it comes to what I hope I will achieve at the African Development Bank is to rethink development in a way that is comprehensive, that is consistent, that is patient, that is disciplined. Now, it's not easy because a lot of what I'm proposing means that at the end of the day, there's no ribbon to cut, there's no press. But the institution is much more efficient, it's more effective. The private sector should never wait 18 months to make a decision. Our partners should never ever feel as though the African Development Bank is in competition. We are partners, we have one continent, 1 billion people who want to develop. We've got a lot of jobs to create. And one thing that I emphasize wherever I go, that it is too easy to think about all of the negative things that are happening on the continent, whether it is war, whether it is hunger, whether it is famine. But the truth of the matter is there are so many bright spots. As you and I speak today, there are more than 250 companies that have a revenue of $1 billion. We have the world's youngest population. This is a population that will be driving the global economy. We've got the rare earth minerals that are driving the digital economy. We've got young people who are not only creative in film and in the arts, but in the sports arena as well. And it's been fascinating for me to see the level of financial ingenuity that is on the continent. Our banks are bolder, they're much more creative, they're working across the continent. The job of a multilateral like the African Development Bank is to partner with governments to bring down the barriers that divide us, whether they be borders, whether they be language, whether they be culture. This continent has a bright future, and I'm confident that we will leave it better for our children and grandchildren than the way we found.
كيف يمكنكم تدبير مثل هذه المؤسسة أو هذه المؤسسة المالية الأفريقية، خصوصاً أنكم قضيتم وقتاً كبيراً خارج أفريقيا؟
When you take a close look at my career, you'll find that I left Zambia at the age of 28, by which time I had worked at the Bank of Zambia. I had ran a private firm in agribusiness. I had worked at Price Waterhouse. Even when I went to the bank, over 7 years of that time was working on the African continent. 3 of those years I was actually based in Mozambique, working on making finance work for Africa with the African Development Bank, reforms that led to the widespread relocation and expansion of banking networks on the continent. I worked on trade and insurance companies. I worked on capital markets development. As my career grew, and I had the privilege of getting into senior management as director for IDA, the $93 billion I raised was raised right here on the continent. We worked in Kigali, we worked in Cote d'Ivoire. 60% of those resources came back to Africa. And as I have served 2 World Bank presidents, at a time of COVID, at a time of debt restructuring, my clients have always been African in the majority. So the truth of the matter is, I feel I've never left. Once you're born here, once you work in Africa, Africa will always be with me. But the one thing I do intend to bring back is the experience I gained working with an institution that has a diverse range of programs and partnerships. I've worked with the Asian Infrastructure Bank, the Asian Development Bank. I've worked right across the world. And so as I bring these skills back home to a continent that has always been in my heart, I want to make sure that we're devoted to finding African solutions in ways that you cannot do from outside the continent. This means working with you and everybody else on the continent, working with African financial institutions, and speaking a language that makes us all proud to be Africans for who we are and the resources that we have. So to those who feel I've spent time on the African continent, they will be surprised at how much I haven't spent, how much time I actually haven't spent working on non-African issues. I'm very proud of that record. I feel privileged to it. And it's an honor to be at this stage where I'm earning the confidence of countries across the continent. This is a message I took to the SADC region. It's the message I took to the COMESA region that have endorsed my candidature. It's a message I'm sharing and discussing with my brothers and sisters right here in Morocco and in North Africa as a whole. We've got a lot of work to do. And I cannot wait to get started because I think we know what needs to be done. The formula for development that was used when America was developing is the same one that Europe used after the World War II. It's the same one that works here. You invest in infrastructure, you invest in your people, you trade with each other, and you make sure that every single day you're focused on results.
Yeah. لا بد أنكم بعد 30 سنة من الخبرات أنكم وضعتم تصورا لتبييض الديون بإفريقيا.
Absolutely. Debt is one of those key issues that we must deal with. And as much as I have spent the last 3 years working on debt-related issues, the common framework that was put in place by the G20 has been too uncommon. It has not been common enough. It cannot be that we spend 3 years only resolving the debt situation of 3 countries. There's a lot of unfinished business there. The 3 things I want to focus on is 1, using data to fully understand the type of debt that we have. We must distinguish countries that have a solvency problem and those that have a liquidity problem. Liquidity problems can be refinanced. Solvency problems require us to sit down and come up with a restructuring proposal. The second thing I want to do is focus on revenue. There is nothing that works faster of getting you out of debt than getting a new job that pays you more. We must make sure that we are systematically going sector by sector and extracting as much revenue from every single industry as we can. We must do this in partnership with the private sector, especially the domestic private sector. Lastly, I want to emphasize that we must do at the country level what we do with companies all the time. Debt in and of itself is not an issue, but we must treat it as the same way we use with chemistry. You mix it and you blend it with equity, with guarantees, with all sorts of financial instruments to make it sustainable. That's how we tell a different story about Africa's future. But this does require work. It requires leadership. It requires the African Development Bank owning this issue and working with the Africa Club in finding ways that work for a larger number of countries at a much faster pace than we currently have at the moment.
شكرا سيد صامويل منزلي ميمبو على قبولكم إجراء هذا الحوار معنا. شكرا لاستضافتكم لنا عندكم. نتمنى لكم حظا كبيرا وموفقا بإذن الله في الانتخابات المقبلة. شكرا لك.
Shukran. Thank you very much for your time. It has been an honor to speak with you today. And I look forward to coming back once I'm elected so that we can discuss the work that we must do on this continent. Shukran.
I hope good luck for you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for you.